let me just weave together what we did last night, what we're going to do this morning, and where we're going from there. How many of you have heard of the 4D model? How many of you think the 4D model is AI? Oh, good. The 4D model is the most popular and well-known application of appreciative inquiry. It is a way to use the theory and the philosophy of appreciative inquiry in whatever work you're doing. And it's been a wonderful process that we've all used and innovated with and worked with. And the conference is based on this. Let me run through the 4Ds and then I'll introduce Di and Jim to you. The discovery, what gives life, I think is the heart and soul of appreciative inquiry. It's the storytelling and the meaning making of what's going on in the system, and it's focusing on it from a positive perspective. It has to do with making a decision about what you're going to look for and discovering what do you want to discover in your system. We will take the interviews that you did last night, and those who were not here will join you in some storytelling in circles. And we will be looking for the underlying themes. That's also discovery. We will be discovering what is the meaning under the stories. What is it in those stories that matters to you the most? That becomes then the raw material for creating your vision and dream of the future, which is what we'll be doing tomorrow morning. After the dream, we move into design, and Bernard and Adrian will be doing that with you Wednesday morning. Design is about aligning the organization and all the parts of it and all the people in it with your dream. You know, how are you going to make this dream happen? And then the destiny phase, which will be that's going to be Frank and Yoop DeJong. And Frank's in the back, right there. Frank Barrett. They will be finishing up the 4Ds for us with a wonderful session on destiny. What happens after you've done all this work and you've put it into place? What happens next? And we'll be working with that. So this morning we're into discovery, and let me introduce your hosts to you, all right? I'm going to start with Diana. This is Dr. Diana Whitney, right here. Who has authored some 44 books or so. Diana is the most prolific writer in our community. She really has some wonderful things out there, and I'm sure you're familiar with them. She is the founder of the Taos Institute. The Taos Institute is a place that all of us who are interested in social constructionism began to gather. How many years ago now, Di?
Probably 15.
Probably 15 years ago.
About 15.
Some of the first appreciative inquiry workshops were offered through Taos, and it's been a real formative and impactful force in our AI community for a long time now. A lot of us are still involved with it very much so, and you'll see in the bookstore books by the Taos Institute. So a very important piece. She's been a real true pioneer in appreciative inquiry. She's done some of the largest and most impactful projects, and if you read her books, you will have an opportunity to see what a really premier practitioner she is of this process. Okay, sitting next to her, Dr. Jim Ludema, who is a professor these days at Benedictine University. And somehow I never think of Jim as a professor. He's a brilliant and gifted man, but he is so accessible, and he's like easy to get to know, and he's lovely. I'm the president of his fan club. I just want to make that clear. He was at Case Western. He's worked with David for many years and has been a real pioneer in the appreciative inquiry field. He also has books out there that you should go and find. And he has turned out quite a few really wonderful innovators with appreciative inquiry through his executive program at Benedictine. It's gained an incredible reputation in a very short time. I'm sure there's so much more I've left out that I should have said about these two fabulous people. They are both founders of AI Consulting, and not just casual founders. They've been at the center of moving AI up in the world. So it's a great pleasure to introduce these two wonderful people.
Thank you very much, Jane. It was lovely. And it is an absolute delight to be here, to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces as we continue this journey of bringing appreciative inquiry into the world, into business, into communities, into schools, into hospitals. It's absolutely wonderful to be sharing this with all of you. I would like to ask you to join me in just a minute of silence. We are here in a most wonderful, luxurious place. I've almost forgotten that there's another world out there. But each of us is here because there are people who support us, who love us, who we're connected to. Each of us is here because there are people in the world who are less fortunate than us, and we hope good for them. So I'd like to ask you to just have a moment of silence, to think about those people that you love, that you care for, to bring their presence into this room, that we may all work on their behalf throughout this week. Welcome to those of you who are on the virtual conference with us. Those of you who are not here in the room but who are around the world, good morning to you. As Jane said, this is a day of discovery. And there probably in all of our lives, there are discoveries that we know of that are heroic. There's discoveries that we live by that are scientists and pioneers. Think of the discovery of penicillin and what it's done for our lives. The discovery of gravity. The discovery of the theory of relativity or the new sciences. The discovery of the Americas. But then in each of our lives, there have been discoveries, those personal discoveries. What have been those moments for you of wonder and awe in your life? Jim and I were talking last night, and he said, I remember when I was young, and I'd go out into the woods. It was nature. I'd pick up a rock, and there would be all sorts of life happening under that rock. I remember when I discovered that caterpillars turned into butterflies. Who would think? Or as an artist, I remember when I learned that if I mixed red paint and yellow paint, I would get orange. That was an amazing discovery for me. So each of us live within a world of great discoveries, heroic discoveries, but also a continual life of personal discoveries. And what we're going to invite you into today is an exploration of organizational discoveries. How appreciative inquiry discovery can influence the businesses and the communities we work with, and ultimately the world that plays out. Now, there's a lot of things in this discovery part of the 4D cycle that we could be focusing on. We could be talking on how do you choose affirmative topics. We could focus on the craft of great appreciative inquiry questions. We could talk about interviews and what makes that interview magical and intimate and so learning and engaging. We could focus on what do you do with hundreds and thousands of stories. And yet we've chosen today to focus on the positive core. That unique central essence of an organization that gives life and moves and inspires everything that happens. And so what we want to do today is make meaning, the concept, give you an understanding of the concept of the positive core, and tell you some stories of organizations, of what they've done and how they've worked with it. So to begin, I want to ask you, anybody tell me what this is? How about this one? Yeah, I have a seed. How about this? We know what this is, right? Okay, a seed of a palm tree. a coconut. The seed grew into the coconut, which is still the seed of a palm tree. Now, what I want to do is put to rest the age-old debate about nature or nurture. Because, as my dear friend Jane would say, it's both. This is the seed of a palm tree, but it won't grow to be a palm tree if I put it in my pocket and carry it home to New Mexico. It will grow to be a coconut and a palm tree if I nurture it with good soil, if I nurture it with great sunlight and just the right amount of water. So the seed of the future, of the potential of this tree, needs appreciation. It needs attention. And so too with human beings. There is something that is implicitly Diana Whitney. I can't be a Jim Ludema, as much as I would like to be. I'm Diana Whitney, but I could be the best Diana Whitney possible as I receive your love and your appreciation and your reflections back to me. It's said there's two ways to bring the light in the world. One, to be the light, and two, to be the mirror. So each of us, as human beings and human systems, we use that funny word, has a potential, but a potential that will not unfold and will not be revealed unless we are in human interaction and exchange with one another. So we say that human systems move in the direction of what they study. Extraordinary organizations, those that we've chosen to study this week together, are energized by and they leverage a deep connection with their positive core. And what is the positive core? It's the story, the narrative, the storyline of the organization's strengths, resources, and assets, tangible and intangible, that are central and essential to the social and strategic vitality. The positive core is like the seed. It's what gives life. It might be what those folks who are working with spiral dynamics call the mimetic code. We human beings have a genetic code. Social systems have a mimetic code, that which is essential and at the heart, but implicit and waiting to be unfolded and revealed. The positive core is very often a story that goes untold. In many of our organizations, we walk in and they can tell us everything that's going wrong, but they don't often tell the story of how great it is. They don't often tell the story of the positive potential, and that's our job, to bring the awareness, the consciousness, and the stories of the tangible assets, financial, the product pipeline, the best practices, strategic alliances, to bring all that into awareness, to bring it shared into the organization, and the intangible assets. The positive core is that storyline that brings all of the strengths, tangible and intangible, into being, into the public conversation, if you will, into the organization's dialogue. Now, this gives us then an understanding of what we mean by positive change. Positive change begins with a rich discovery, you might say an analysis of the organization's positive core. Everything that gives life to that organization when it's at its best. And so when we're talking about the positive core, we're talking about that latent potential that doesn't come into being, it doesn't get known, it doesn't get revealed until we talk about it, until we begin our inquiry and our dialogue, and then it comes to life. And so in every organization, there is that latent potential that is awaiting our curiosity and our inquiry into it. Positive change involves the deliberate discovery of everything that gives life to a system when it is most effective in social, economic, and human terms. Now, there are a number of ways to do discovery and to really delve into this positive core. And one of those ways is what we call a core group inquiry, a small group of people who go off and do an inquiry. And I want to tell you the story of a core group inquiry at British Airways. A number of years ago, the folks in New York said, we need a new facility. And people were talking about how cramped they were, and the technology wasn't current, and the building wasn't as beautiful as the building in the UK. And so there was a commitment to move, to relocate, to find a new building. The group of people who were part of the facilities team said, you know, we've just learned this thing called appreciative inquiry. Maybe we shouldn't just have this little team make decisions. Maybe we should get some other people involved. And so they decided to do an inquiry. And they went out and they did interviews. And they interviewed about 120 people. And they put together an appreciative survey. What do you love about our current building? What makes it work for you? Tell me about a story about this building and your relationship to it. Tell us about your hopes and dreams for a better facility. And they collected all of this information and they mapped the positive core of the existing building and the dreams of the future. Now, what they found was surprising. They found that the most important thing in the facility was the location to people's families, access to transportation. So even the idea of going out into the further suburbs and having a beautiful, spacious campus, but it made it hard for transportation. It made it hard to be near children. It wasn't what people dreamed for. What they wanted was to stay close to family and have great technology. That's what they wanted. Now that was easy. We don't have to move. We don't have to relocate. We can rewire the building, paint it, pick new furniture. The other thing people wanted was to have a say in their furniture. Yeah, right. And so they did. They did this amazing thing. They put out sample rooms, different colors, and folks got to walk around and look and try on the chairs and see the desks and vote on colors and vote on designs. So the study of what people really valued about the existing facility led to a very different set of decisions than had the facilities team, who had been listening to all the bitching and moaning and the paint falling off the wall here and there, going off and creating a new building. A core team inquiry, a few people interviewing, hearing the voices of many, and then really creating a profile of the most positive possibility for a building, saved money, and created a lot of very happy people.
I just want to say a couple of words about what we will be doing for the rest of the morning, and then get back into the flow of the presentation that Diana started. First, we want to look at how discovery activates an organization's positive core to produce extraordinary organizational performance. We want to look at why is it that when you connect strength with strength, joy with joy, hope with hope, capacity with capacity, it unleashes extraordinary performance in organizations. Second, we're going to hear some stories of how different organizations have done discovery in innovative ways. And Diana started that with the story of British Airways. We're going to look at a couple additional examples. In addition to the core group inquiry, we're going to look at whole system 4D dialogue, where everyone in an organization and stakeholders engage in interviews with one another over time. We'll also look at the appreciative inquiry summit approach, where as part of a 3 to 5 day process, a large group of stakeholders interview each other to do the discovery. And then we'll also look a little bit at mass mobilized internet inquiry, where hundreds or thousands of people interview each other via the internet. And here are the cases that we'll look at to do those things. Then the additional objectives for the session are to do a little bit of our own discovery. Once we're done examining some of those case studies, we're going to invite you to, in your groups, do a little bit of the discovery of the positive core of extraordinary organizations based on your interviews from last night. And then at the end of the session, we're going to hear the story of Hunter Douglas Window Fashion's division, which is located in Broomfield, Colorado. They have done phenomenal work with appreciative inquiry over the last 7 years or so. using appreciative inquiry year after year after year in a variety of applications in their operations. And it's a remarkable story, and I think you'll really enjoy that. And sort of the three things that we really want to highlight about the positive core and why discovery of the positive core is so important in organizations and as a first step in the appreciative inquiry process are these three themes. Number one, discovery of the positive core engages the entire system. It gives people a voice in the co-creation of their shared future. You know, we've talked about organizations being social constructions that literally get created in the conversations, the dialogue, and the interactions of every member of the system. Well, the discovery phase in appreciative inquiry, its very purpose is to engage all of those folks in authoring their own destiny, in creating their own future. So discovery engages people in discovering that positive core and unleashing it. Number two, it educates. There's a learning function when we discover the positive core. It creates learning and builds new knowledge about the strengths, capacities, and positive potentials that we have in our organizations. David Cooperrider said yesterday, the appreciable world is so much bigger than we're able to see, even with our appreciative eye. There are so many strengths, capacities, assets, and so on in organizations that we simply never see because we don't look. And the discovery phase is an opportunity to take time and to be in dialogue with others to find those and to find unique and creative ways to combine them for innovation. And then the third thing, discovery of the positive core energizes an organization. It creates upward spirals of positive emotions, connections, and performance. And we'll look a little bit at why that's so important. And I want to jump down to this idea of the discovery of the positive core being a process that engages people in the co-creation of their future. And I want to share this story of the work we've done, Diana, myself, and our colleague Mike Mantell, who is also in the audience. If you get a chance to talk with him about this project, that would be great over the course of the next couple of days as well. It's with the American Baptist churches. We did a denomination-wide inquiry with this organization. Now, the American Baptist churches were founded in 1812, about 200 years ago, when they separated themselves from the Southern Baptist Convention over the issue of slavery. Today, they are considered by many folks the most ethnically diverse denomination in the country, in the United States. About 47% of their members are African American, 45% of their members Euro-American, 4% Hispanic, 3% Asian American, and 1% other ethnicities. They're also a denomination that's dedicated to vibrant social action. For close to 200 years, they've been doing fabulous work locally, regionally, nationally, internationally around economic development, racial reconciliation, youth work with gangs, healthcare, and so on. And they have a great reputation for their social action. They're also a radically decentralized denomination in which congregation is king. Some churches are quite hierarchical. Well, the Baptists are just the opposite. They're radically dispersed, radically decentralized, and each congregation is free to do anything they want to do based on what they feel their call is. And so in that context, many of the churches, the local churches that have been formed and grown over the last few years, are much bigger in terms of budget, in terms of programs, in terms of activity, than the central offices of the denomination. And they're beginning to wonder, what's the purpose of even having a denomination? Why do we need to be saddled with this bureaucracy when we're doing such great work ourselves locally? And there's even talk in the denomination about disbanding the denomination. So the leaders of the American Baptist churches came to us and said, we want to use appreciative inquiry to somehow search about the future of our denomination. We want to engage the entire denomination in the process, and we want to create a new vision for the denomination, new priorities and new models for vibrant denominationalism over the next 200 years. What does it mean to be a denomination over the next 200 years? So here's what we did. We first formed a task force of about 25 people, and that took 3 months to form that task force, to find 25 people, because they had to represent the diverse communities of the entire system. That was one of the most important criteria for the selection of these folks. About 25 people, and then we formed a discovery team, another 75 people that also represented that broad diversity. These folks, in turn, we trained them in appreciative inquiry, and they, in turn, went out and interviewed about 3,000 folks nationwide. Some one-on-one interviews, a lot of mini summits where they brought people together in dialogue about the future of the denomination. Where's it going to go? What are the greatest resources we have and strengths and capacities as a denomination? And there was a relentless search for what we called the positive deviants, which I found kind of fascinating in the context of a bunch of American Baptists to call them positive deviants. But these are the folks that were on the fringes of the denomination, many of them huge churches that were doing vibrant work in the world, but were not at the core of the denomination. We wanted to bring in those voices too, the marginalized voices, the fringe voices into the process. So they did about 3,000 interviews, some of them online, most of them face-to-face. They also did a survey in their denominational magazine called In Mission. And then they came together in a summit this past June in a deep process of spiritual discernment. And they looked at hearing those stories from around the denomination as exactly that, a process of discernment. Not data analysis, but discernment about what were possibilities for the future, what are their greatest strengths today. And the things that they really discovered in that process were, number one, that they have a lot more in common than they have things that are pulling them apart. For years, they've been focusing on their differences, what's pulling them apart, what's fragmenting, what we disagree with, where our points of disagreement are. And they found that they had so much more in common than they had in terms of pulling them apart. They also discovered a rich body of resources. I mean, the number of programs that they have going on around the country, for example, youth programs with gangs in LA, and the folks over on the East Coast didn't even know about them. And there were hundreds of examples like that of the resources and relationships they had within the denomination. They also experienced the simple joy of being together. And that summit turned into an absolute revival. I mean, there was worship, there was singing. They even took up an offering for one of the projects that got started as a result of this summit. Now, that's the first Appreciative Inquiry Summit. I imagine we've done 100 or so or more summits by now. That was the first summit I've ever been in which they took up an offering for an initiative right there in the summit. And then they also came up with a new discovery, is that it's worth the risk of staying together based on the impact we can have, the model we can be as a radically diverse denomination in the United States. Let's stick together. Let's find a way to move together for the next 200 years. So what they came up with was a unifying vision statement, a set of clear priorities for 2005 to 2015. Those priorities were a lot of work on spiritual formation, leadership development, and mission in the world. And then there were a proliferation of grassroots initiatives, web-based sharing of success stories, exchanges across the country, joint ventures, and so on. And the idea here is that through this inclusion of the entire system, the 4D, whole-scale 4D process, it brought in the broad diversity of the denomination to discover their strengths, their capacities, their assets, their great traditions, their values that they share in common. And that served as a platform, a base for mobilizing action into the future. We talked about how discovery of the positive core engages the entire system. We also talked about the learning potential in discovery of the positive core, how it educates the system. And that's the little story I want you to tell.
We've had a great opportunity to meet some amazing people from a company called AmeriQuest Data Services. And they chose to do a series of Appreciative Inquiry Summits. They did 3 summits that involved about 700 employees. The overarching purpose was achieving exceptional performance and profitability through people. Now, it was just exhilarating. It was one of these situations where we had folks came to Taos, they learned about appreciative inquiry. Amanda, Trust and Bloom and I were there, and we went to California and met people, and we did a meeting with a planning team, and the request was, well, can we do the summits next week? And we said, well, you may be able to, because you tend to be a pretty high-performing organization. We're kind of getting that about you. We're not sure we can get ready by next week. So it was about a month, which was a very short time to get 3 summits ready to go. So we worked with an internal team of people. That's why Lisa's here. I just visit with her. And the topics that they chose for the summit were wonderful. An appreciative culture, which had to do with recognition, rewards, and seeing the best in each other. Boundless synergy. Those times when collaboration and teamwork really enable leaps of productivity. And profit from empowerment. A real link between the people and the business. The interviews were done during the Appreciative Inquiry Summits. So there were one-on-one interviews, very much like you did last night. And there were a couple of things that came out. Jim sort of buzzed by a slide earlier quickly, in which we're saying that the more the relationships, new relationships can form among new people, improbable pairs, the more the knowledge-rich organization gets created, the greater the innovation. And I think that that was very much the case. In these summits, we had very cross-generational, new employees, and there were people in the summits who'd been there for 3 weeks. And the folks who'd been there for a longer period of time. It was almost as if there was a secondary phenomena happening, and that was a new employee orientation in the summit. It wasn't planned, but it was happening. People were meeting each other. They were making connections. The relationships just built. The network built. The knowledge, the whole system learning that happened during the summit. As people shared the business strategy, the work processes, and their desire and dream of this culture that would continue high performance and accelerated productivity. So the knowledge-rich culture built, and then the projects that came out were phenomenal. And they came out in all 3 areas. There were projects that were related to people, rewards, recognition, continuous learning. There were projects related to performance. One that I kind of chuckled about, one person stood up and said, we need an email protocol. We're one of the best technology organizations in the world, and we've got to have some way of sorting our own emails. Let's develop it. And then somebody says, yeah, if we get it good, it'll be a product. And new products that began to come out, customer ways of being with customers and new products and services. It was a very exciting period of time, and Lisa is kind of managing all of the projects that are going on as the result of that. But in this case, the summit methodology was the way in which discovery, the whole 4D process occurred in that summit. So it's yet another way in which discovery happens.
I just want to hit a couple of points on this idea that discovery and tapping into the positive core energizes a system. Tomorrow night, in one of the fireside chats, Barbara Fredrickson from the University of Michigan will be here, and she has done a bunch of groundbreaking research on the power of positive emotions, primarily in individuals. And in a nutshell, here's what her research shows. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of it. She'll do much more with it tomorrow night. That negative emotions tend to narrow our thought-action repertoire, right? And this comes from our ancestry. When they saw a saber-toothed tiger running after them, they got scared. And they had only 3 options: fight and die, run, or hide, right? And so over time that developed those kinds of responses to negative emotional arousal, narrowing the thought-action repertoire. You don't have many options and you got to do them fast. Positive emotions, on the other hand, broaden the thought-action repertoire. For example, when you're in a state of joy, you like to play, to begin imagining, to invent, to experiment, all the things necessary for innovation. When you're in a state of interest, when you're interested in something, You want to investigate it. You want to explore it. You want to get involved in it. All the things needed for generating new knowledge. When you're in a state of attraction to another person or group of people, you want to connect with them. You want to relate to them. You want to cooperate with them. And all the things necessary for pro-social behavior. And so positive emotions broaden the thought-action repertoire and actually encourage innovation, creativity, learning, new knowledge, cooperation, pro-social behavior, and so forth. In addition, they undo the lingering negative arousal from negative emotions, right? It pushes the negative emotions out of the way. It's like an undo button on those negative emotions. And in addition, over time, it builds resilient coping mechanisms. It's like it strengthens your immune system. So the interesting question for us in terms of energizing human systems, what would it look like if we took those same principles around positive emotions to the large group level, to the level of a team, or to the level of a department, or a division, or an organization, or even of the world? If we were in continuous search of the positive, the strengths, the joy, the interest, the love, the capacities, and so forth, what would that do in terms of broadening our capacity? Intellectual capacity, decision-making capacity, and undoing negative emotional arousal in the systems, and creating real resilience and health of our human systems over time. It's fascinating research, and we're just beginning to understand these dynamics. A short example of how that's been done on a really broad scale in the discovery process is some work that Ron Fry, our colleague, he's also here at the conference, and it'd be great for you to connect with him, work he did with World Vision. They were going to do a summit to implement or to create some strategy or priorities for their vision statement, which was already created. They were going to bring about 150 people to Bangkok this last June, but prior to that, 6 weeks prior, they invited folks from around the country. World Vision works in about 90 countries around the world. They invited folks in each one of those countries to share stories about when World Vision has been at its best. World Vision works primarily with children and their families to help children develop in a positive way. When has World Vision been at its best in doing that? That was 1 week, and about 4,000 different groups met and sent in information, data via the web around when World Vision had been at its best, discovering that positive core. The next week they said, what is our vision for the state of children in the world in the next 10 to 15 years? And again, these groups met around that question and sent in their responses via the internet. And then the third week they said, what are our hopes for the top priorities for World Vision to make that vision of our world come true? And they sent that in. And then all of that information, all of those stories were brought to the summit. And while they were at the summit, each day they would send out the results of the work that they had done during the summit. And these same folks would read it and talk about it in their locations around the world and send it back in so that they could see it the next day. So while the summit was only 150 people big, it included 4,000 people or more around the world via the internet, the web technology created by iCohere. We're doing a similar thing with this conference and the web-based conference through Big Mind Media and iCohere. But the capacity to build that energy on a global scale is one of the neat frontiers in the discovery phase of appreciative inquiry that I think we're currently in.
So, it's time now for you all to get to do some work. And to cue that up, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of mapping the positive core. How many of you have heard that expression? How many of you have had clients do maps of their positive core? Yeah, a lot of you have begun to experiment that and work with it. So folks do interviews. They get excited about what they've learned. They start to share stories. And then the question is, the vocabulary is getting rich. We're getting a great vocabulary of positive energy, of good ideas we're sharing. And how can we create something that really captures it in its whole? And so we've started to do pictures and illustrations. And I want to show you just a few of those. This is one Jim and I worked with a casino the Santa Ana Star Casino. And so their map of their positive core was a galaxy. And so each group, each table, had a stack of construction paper. We had some members of the planning team that said, oh, let's cut out stars so it'll be easy for people. And we said, let's see what happens if people do it themselves. And they had a blast. I mean, the chairman of the board cutting out stars and giggling. It was wonderful. So that's their positive core strengths. At British Airways, they did best practices banners. This was from the Dallas station. This is from Philadelphia. Oops. And this is from Washington, D.C. I'm out of control. Okay. At ADS, you can see there it was kind of a universe of success. The theme of the summit was the right stuff with the rocket ship taking off. In another organization where Jim and I have worked, the First Caribbean International Bank, they put a big blue sea, plastic ocean on the wall, and every group added to the ocean. And so you'll see there's some fish, there's a treasure chest on there, and that's a luxury liner. And all of the positive core, the aspects of the positive core are in the lifeboats. So, just in case, we've got our same. So there's a lot of ways that we can talk about and represent the positive core of an organization. We like to use lively, creative ways of having groups illustrate their positive core. Each member of the summit, each table group, can then add to the map of the positive core. So we want to get you working on the positive core of extraordinary organizations. We did interviews last night. It was a wonderful interview guide. And what we'd like you to do now is form groups of 6 or 8. The chairs are kind of seated in 6s, so you can pull your chairs around into a circle. If you want to form 8s, that would be very nice. Share your best stories and your innovations that you heard about from question number 3. So when you go back to your interview guide and your notes, we're asking you to only use question number 3. As a group, we'd like you to identify the 4 to 6 qualities. As you listen to the stories, draw out the themes. What are the 4 to 6 things that you believe contribute to extraordinary organizations? Create a metaphor, draw a picture, and be prepared to share your picture and tell a story.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We want to hear and see your presentation of the positive core of strengths of extraordinary organizations. And we're going to have about 20 minutes for those presentations, and so obviously we won't be able to hear them all.
Yeah, hello. And in our group, we have a mixture of different languages and cultures. And we have just discussed how we could present you what we have shared among us. And we have this statement which says, human organizations flourish when they are committed to self-appreciative human beings who thrive in co-creative partnership.
Las organizaciones humanas florecen cuando se comprometen en apreciarse a sí mismos como seres humanos que se desarrollan co-creando asociatividad.
So when we have people of such nature, we see the kitten becomes the lion.
El gato se convierte en el león.
And then the baby becomes the queen.
La bebé se convierte en la reina.
And last but not the least, the seed becomes the tree.
Y la semilla se convierte en el árbol.
as we were looking at what creates exceptional organizations, we decided that in all the stories that we heard, one of the things that was incredibly powerful was that they were affirmatively disruptive events that occurred. So we used the metaphor of a lotus that grows out of the muck. And through the affirmative disruption, some of the qualities and characteristics were trusting human potential, a compelling vision, excitement, a common destiny, applied revolution, and creating freedom, believing in the possible, and unleashing capabilities. And so our thought was that when you can allow this to rise from the muck, you create a beautiful lotus of an organization.
Terrific.
Good morning. I'm Yumi Schleifer, and
I'm Haiti Schleifer.
And we are representative of an unspoken constituency, a very important constituency in this conference, the children. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean by that what we're not addressing, and we felt it's important, is to talk about how our childhood experiences have influenced the way we progress through an organization and the very evolvement of an organization. And it came about from my childhood story when we did our interview. We had wonderful stories, and somehow my story resonated with some of the people in our group. It had to do with building a little hut, 6, 7 kids, and just kind of by itself, because we were all very connected with each other. This hut just kind of evolved, and the hut became a symbol for our group of what can involve when our life force is given free flow. So what we're all about here is putting the life force, giving it the freedom of flowing in order to create bigger and more exciting future. And what we've tried to symbolize here is how down here from our childhood experience flow our vision for the future and the ability to create a new future for our organizations and for our world as a whole. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I've been married to Yumi nearly 40 years, and it was the first time I heard the story of the hut. So discovery is really very useful.
Yes, we discussed about how the positive core of an organization, its purpose is to unveil the vine of wisdom. And this is our vine of wisdom. We saw true leadership as providing the soil, the dirt, the nurturing foundation, with also the waves of the sea, water that reflects and supplies the nutrients for the vine of wisdom. We have here diversity and the fruits of the wisdom. There were formerly round grapes that have now transformed into longitudinal lines. And we also have a place for positive deviancy on our vine. We have the feathers to fan the positivity that goes throughout the organization as it moves heliotropically toward the light of love. And so we have taken these are basically, we went beyond 4 to 5 themes, but holistic well-being, financially, emotionally, physically. We have the concept of unveiling the wisdom, viral self-empowerment, owning the impact, education, listening as innovation, and decentralized self-management to foster entrepreneurialism, especially in a good educational environment, and finally, creating and following the code of support. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, you know how it's football games and soccer games, they do the wave? So we're going to demonstrate how a wave of positive energy can flow through an organization and strengthen the positive core. So when I point to your area, I want you to stand up and throw your arms up and sit down. Okay, ready? Stand up, go all the way through, all the way through, all the way through, all the way through. Now come on back! It comes back this way. Come on back, come on back, come on back. Now you, back up. Come on this way. Woo! All right. Give yourself a hand.
All right.
This has been just an incredible session. I encourage you to continue the day of discovery. Take time to get to know each other, ask questions to probe into the positive core of one another, to take a walk in nature, and to just see what's out there, to learn and to really effloresce on your own. So thank you. Jim?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for a great morning. Wonderful work. I'd encourage you to go take a walk along the wall of the positive core to see all the presentations. The groups that did not have the opportunity to present up on stage, please also bring your pictures and metaphors over to that wall and post them so that we have them all there. Take a look at those and enjoy and learn from and really experience and be energized by that positive core. Thanks for a great session this morning. I want to turn it over to Jane Watkins. She's got a few housekeeping details to take care of and also let you know what's on tap for this afternoon before we break to lunch.
The next thing I want to do is to tell you that we are going to take just a minute now to hear from Sue and her crew. And we're calling this Postcards from the Edge. All right? Now, Diana pointed out to me that Postcards from the Edge was about two neurotic females, but I don't mean that about Sue, but evidently the virtual conference is going on fabulously while we're here. Here's what one person wrote. Gabriel, Nancy, and Sue. I've attended a lot of online conferences, but this is, without a doubt, the best integration of face-to-face and online that I've ever seen. I've never seen anyone go to the lengths that you have to include us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel almost as if I'm there. I have a stiff neck and aching behind, too. Everyone is either smiling or engaged just the way it should be. How fabulous, how inspiring, how wonderful. All right. And then just to give you a little bit of a sense of what's going on online, there's a questionnaire there where we're asking people who come online some appreciative questions. And one of them is, what are your passions? So this is from Mary Liz Grease, who says, where do I feel the most passion? When I'm able to lead others to greater understanding of themselves, of their place in the world, of the unique combination of gifts and talents they have that enables them to contribute positively to the world. I love coaching, she says. So we'll be bringing you more little vignettes of who's out there online with us. They are really seeing everything pretty much that we're doing here. So if you want me to send them any messages, you can give them to me and I'll do the same, okay?